Gerard, thank you very much, Judge Dennis Davis. Are you still Judge Dennis Davis? Are you always Judge Dennis Davis? Because the little birdie tells me you're retiring or have retired or you're going through a retirement process.
I basically retired, Bruce. You're quite right. Say for some odds and sods that I'm doing, which I'm quite happy to do. We keep our title, by the way. It's the one thing that we're entitled to do, apart from our pension, which of course people say is quite good, but others would say that's the sacrifice you put up for years of misery.
Yeah, I had a cadet major at school who taught geography who insisted on being called major.
No, I don't insist on that at all.
You've got a reputation as being a guy who loves tax. You worked on the Tax Commission. You had a tax commission named after you. Are you one of these guys who thinks tax is the panacea of all ills?
No, not at all. I mean, my real love is constitutional law, legal theory, and competition law, where I've sort of was for 20 years, the judge president. But I got sort of landed up in tax, I suspect, because I literally got my first job at the university teaching tax, because I'd been at the Old Mutual for roughly 2 years, teaching the insurance salesman about various forms of estate planning and tax. And I sort of drifted into the process. And that's how it happened.
So this idea that people think that this guy, all he wants to do is layer tax upon tax upon tax on people is misplaced.
Absolutely right. That's the problem about fake news.
So talk to me about South Africa's tax position. Where are we as a country? Are we in terms of levels of mess, tell me when to stop my hand going up. You haven't told me to stop
about
yet.
There.
Okay, yeah.
Right. We're in a serious trouble. And we're in serious trouble, not so much, well, for perhaps in relation to the tax system for two reasons. One of which we can talk about, which is absolutely pathetic and tepid growth, with very few prospects, seems to me, of the kind of growth that would allow us to have a revenue take of the kind which would again permit the sort of reconstruction of South African society. And to be perfectly frank, and over the last little while, we've seen this in spades by looking at what's been going on at the Zondo Commission over the last couple of weeks, in relation to the degradation of the tax system, the tax collection system, which was documented so ably by Judge Nugent, and which shows that we're trying desperately to get the ship in the right direction. I think Commissioner Kieswetter is doing that, but that's had a really massive effect on tax collection. So if you take the trying to reconstruct the system, and secondly, the kind of parlous growth we're in, yeah, that's why your hand should be quite high.
You are actually going to join SARS as a consultant because,
yes.
I mean, we've been hearing the same stories ever since the days of Pravin Gordhan, that there are lots of people who swan about the place who don't pay their fair share of taxes. Now, many people watching us today will be saying, hold on a second, but I'm persecuted and prosecuted. I'm audited. I get SARS sending me 1,000 questions. I'm a good and honorable person. I do my best to make sure that I'm an honorable taxpayer, yet I feel picked on all the time. And it feels like they're going for compliant taxpayers. I think the idea of you going there is to widen the net, so to speak.
Yes, I to be honest, my advice to them is I wouldn't, the vast majority of people who've been listening to our conversation are tax compliant. And frankly, as I said often, I'm not particularly interested if you sort of claim for an additional meal, which was a private meal and was actually, you put it up as business expenditure. Frankly, that's a waste of revenue's time. I'm really worried about what are clearly a significant group of people, companies who are exploiting the system, whether it be evasion of customs duty, the manipulation of the VAT system, or simple evasion of not paying tax, or transfer pricing and similar shenanigans which companies deal with. That's what I'm worried about. And I just want to make one point about that. I know every time I talk about this, people say, you want to tax us more. The answer is no. But if you are paying tax and your neighbor next door is paying absolutely nothing, I don't really understand why you wouldn't be saying, yeah, right on, we should be dealing with those people. And that's who I'm really interested in, are the people who ultimately have evaded tax. We know that there are many of them. We know that tax tables don't make sense. For example, there are only something like 5,000 people who have taxable income over 5 million rand a year. Now, I invite anybody in this who's listening to us to just drive down Sandton or Bryanston or Camps Bay or or Bishop's Court and count the houses. Take out the houses that are owned by the foreigners. Now, you cannot run those houses on parsimonious levels of income. So what I'm trying to say is there's a huge gap between, as it were, people who are paying their fair share and people who aren't.
I mean, there was an old story about, all SARS needs to do is go outside every private school every morning and make a note of number plates and compare the number plates to the kids enrolled. And you very quickly can triangulate who the parents are. And very quickly, you'll see who's declaring incomes Dave King style. What was he declaring at the time? 60,000
Well,
a year.
exactly. There's a wonderful story that they tell me about, they call it Mr. Chips. Apparently, somebody who was in SARS, who was a really old codger, and opened up his business day one morning to see somebody smiling next to a big fancy Ferrari. And he thought, I wonder whether this chap is tax compliant. And to cut a very long story short, given that every single justification for how he got the Ferrari was nonsense, he landed up by paying SARS 500 million rand back taxes. That's the reality.
But now, you see, SARS' original claim, because I broke that story many years ago, was a 1.4 billion rand tax claim, and this is in 2000 money.
Yeah.
It was absolutely enormous. It was the biggest tax claim ever. And Dave King had structured, 5 or 6 entities. One was called Ben Nevis, another one was called Matika Trading. There were a whole bunch of others.
Yes. He was a specialist. Yeah.
And he'd done very, very well out of it. He made a huge amount of money out of a company called Specialized Outsourcing. He declared it as revenue rather than income. And it got incredibly technical. And you'd go to court cases, and there'd be 5 advocates sitting next to each other, each representing individual legal entities. And this guy tied the system up in knots for 15 years before there was a settlement at a third of what had been claimed from him years before. It's hardly any wonder that people don't treat the system seriously, because if you've got enough money to fight it, you'll be better off in the long term by simply digging your heels in. I mean, that's a popular perception.
Yes, and I think that's right. And that's why I think to some extent, with some people who've evaded tax, they need to go to jail, because that actually concentrates the mind. I mean, I remember Praveen Gordon telling me many years ago, Bruce, when I was advising him, when he became the Commissioner of Inland Revenue, one of his great talents was that he was able to call on all sorts of people. I knew I wasn't the only one. He was checking up what I said. Somebody else probably phoned you and said, how do you do this? And he said to me at some point, all we've got to do is put 1 or 2 people behind bars, and the deterrence factor will kick in and people will stop messing around and they'll go and take amnesty, whatever it is. And that's correct. And the reason that the last amnesty failed so abysmally, I was calculating that we'd get around about 15, 16 billion. We got around about 3 or 4, I think. Well, it was the high point of the Buoyancy era. Why was anybody going to bother? And I want
to talk about Buoyancy in a bit. But
you can. Yeah, sorry.
That you can get really tough on people and set examples, public examples. Tax law is complicated, and there are all sorts of protections that taxpayers have, even bad taxpayers or people who don't pay their taxes have in the legislation. Is the tax law a bit soft?
Yeah, it's too. Look, quite frankly, some years ago when we were in the CATS Commission, the government at that point briefed Eddie Brimberg, who was one of our leading tax silks at the time, to actually draft a plain language statute for income tax. I think he found it almost impossible to do because it'd be hugely difficult. But the act is too complicated. It's not enforced properly. And SARS, frankly, over quite a number of years now, has not had the capability of enforcing its own legislation as well as it should do. So you're right, on all range of levels, you find SARS basically facing a battery of very talented advocates who, to quote in a different context, use a Stalingrad approach. And that effectively is the problem. That's why I say, if you've got a better deterrence, if I knock on your door and say, but Mr. Whitfield, this doesn't stack up with that, it's probable that in many ways, if I'm offering you a settlement, you'll take it. And even if I can get 60 or 70% of what you owe, Bruce, I mean, frankly, I'd rather take that than be tied up in the 15 years as you spoke about in the King case. Yeah.
And also, then you know that I have a history and you look at me more carefully into the future. I mean, I was...
Absolutely. And that's...
I had dinner. I have dinners with billionaires sometimes. They're not the same one every time because they never invite me back twice because I'm a bit too curious. But sitting there with this guy who'd been in business for a very long time, saying he couldn't understand why each and every single year he was audited to the hilt. And he said, if it wasn't all digital, it'd be like taking a bucky load of paper and dumping it at SARS each and every single year. The same paper as I dumped last year, the year before, the year before, the year before, and the year before. And each and every single year, they come back to me 6 months later to say, thank you very much, you're compliant. I know I'm compliant. I take compliance seriously. That's why I'm as wealthy as I am. And it does strike you that SARS focuses on the wrong stuff a lot of the time too.
Yeah, they do. They do. And part of the reason is that they've lost the capacity to do precisely what you think they should be doing, which is how do you forensically hone in on the people who are the culprits and leave the others alone? Now, there are questions to be asked. I mean, we did a little pilot work in SARS where we took a taxpayer. I didn't know the name of the taxpayer, but I pretty much guessed because I at the time didn't have a secrecy, but I was helping them. And if you looked at this particular file, you thought to yourself, it's impossible given the nature of this particular individual that he is a tax evader. Yet there were all sorts of questions that should have been asked. Now, it's legitimate, it seems to me, to say, if you've taken out X out of South Africa, can you explain, why it's not a controlled foreign corporation and therefore the income is deemed to be yours? I think that's a perfectly legitimate exercise. But you've got to have skilled people to do it, to know at that some particular point in time, okay, I can tick the box, let him go, move on. And unfortunately, that capacity has been lost over some while. It was there under Gordon, it was there shortly thereafter, and now we're trying to, as it were, recalibrate it.
The problem is, and so many aspects of South Africa, I mean, we've got more legislation than we know what to do with. Whenever we have a problem, we legislate for it rather than manage it. And we have lots of rules and regulations. We have lots of arms of the security forces and police and all kinds of things. But we have a fairly inefficient state. I'd be a bit polite on that. Maybe an incapable state, a state that normally Edward Kieswetter would, file a complaint with the police, go to the local police station. It would work its way through the system and eventually maybe get to the Hawks. The Hawks would investigate, and then there'd be a charge laid and somebody would have to appear in court. SARS had to go it alone, which then led to the entire rogue unit fiasco. And it's undermined the power, authority, and position of SARS to a point where we have massive tax shortfalls today.
It's an extraordinary astute observation that you make for a whole range of reasons. Let me just try to truncate my answer as best I can. I don't think we're a failed state, but we are an incapable state. And if you want to have an illustration, which everybody on this particular call will know, look at the vaccine debacle. I mean, how many people here, I rhetorically ask, have confidence that we're going to be able to distribute vaccine when it finally comes? And we have to ask ourselves, why on earth did it take so long in the first place? And we still don't know as we speak. It's an incapable state. And your point, therefore, is that if you try to get SARS up to where it was under Gordon, how does it operate, as it were, of an island of competence in the sea of complete mediocrity, incompetence, and corruption? It's a good point. And it's one of the things, Bruce, which is why what we are working on, probably the last report that the Davis Committee, Tax Committee will do. And I'm working with Professor Leguala on this particular topic, which is, can we reconfigure the legislation to allow SARS to institute prosecutions against taxpayers who are ultimately recalcitrant? Because quite frankly, we don't think that the NPA in its present situation is able to do that. And I cannot tell you the staggering amount of cases which are at the NPA at the moment, ranging way beyond 1,000, more than that, which in a sense have just collected dust. And if you then go and ask yourself, and you look at the tax book, which people don't really do, if you look at how much outstanding debt is owed to SARS, it is staggering. And as you would know, and anybody who's an insolvency lawyer will know, the longer the debt is outstanding, the less likely that you're going to collect it. So if you simply take the debt over the book for, say, a year's outstanding, trust me, we would be able to collect sufficient that we pay for vaccines 3 or 4 times over. So that's the problem. And so what we're trying to do is kind of negotiate ourselves around a problem of a prosecuting agency, which quite frankly, at this point in time, I accept that Advocate Boutte is doing her very level best to get it right. But at this moment, as we freeze, it's just not going to be able to do the job.
So as part of the job that you're being asked to do, to help SARS do, because you'll go as a consultant, not as a staff member, is to create, I don't know, rogue unit 2, for want of a better term, or a unit that persecutes the rogues rather.
Yes. I think what we try, there are a couple of things. One is hopefully to capacitate SARS to do proper auditing, which is ultimately what that unit was all about. And I know you're a hugely distinguished journalist, but you know as well as I do, there were rogue journalists involved in that particular.
No, there was it was a very significant part of the problem was the misinformation campaign that was either deliberately aided and abetted, or by the time the guys realized they were being fed a lie, they were trying to cover up their own tracks. Whatever went wrong in that particular case, yes.
It was deliberately done. I know that. I even know some of the parties involved. And a little while back, when Mr. Gordon testified before Zondo, he sort of dropped a hint. If you listen to him, about one or two of the people who were clearly involved in this, he knows that too. And if you look at the two people, I just want to make a point on a human level. If you look at the two people, Van Lockenberg and Symington, who I did work with, who are incredibly decent people, who did Symington, who I worked closely with because he was involved in the amnesty, and I had to persuade him to come on board in the amnesty. So we had a lot to do with each other. He's exactly the kind of person in SARS you want. If you look at the man now, and you look at Van Lockenberg, these people have been deeply affected psychologically by that campaign against.
They've been harmed. I mean, if we were in America, they'd be filing personal injury lawsuits.
Massive.
That the next 10 generations of their families would never need to work again.
Yeah. And unfortunately, what that has done, so when you say, what am I going to be doing? Yeah, one's got to be cautious about how this is presented. I have no illusion that if part of our job, which it must be, would be to look at to audit people where there are credible allegations of corruption and deal with them. I have little doubt that there'll be a second campaign about trying to discredit any initiative that because the stakes are so high. But if I have my way, I would have a SARS person, I would have had a SARS person at the Zondo Commission right through this period taking notes and saying, blogs, this seems pretty credible. Let's have an audit of blogs or etc. And I think that's still the best way to curb corruption in South Africa.
I mean, it's the Mr. Chips way. You sat with the newspaper and started almost like an old-fashioned police drama, putting up bits of paper on a wall, connecting bits of string, and going, well, how can you own Amazulu Football Club? How can you be building schools for Nelson Mandela? How can you be driving these cars, living in this area, knocking down this number of houses, and still be claiming that you only earn 60,000 Rand a year? Perhaps there is something rotten in the state of South Africa. If we're going to be beefing up SARS's ability to collect, and Edward Kieswetter is very big on tax morality. He wants us all to want to pay our taxes. He and Pravin Gordhan go back a long way, very similar approach. And Pravin Gordhan started using the term in budget speeches. I've heard Tito Buoyancy using the term in budget speeches about taxpayers need to feel like they get value for money. Now, the vast majority of us do not get value for money. If we invested the amount of money we pay in our taxes in security systems, schooling, personal doctors, private police forces, our money would go a lot further than it seems to go in South Africa. And this is the big disconnect. You can have a wonderful tax collection service and a tax morality, but if you don't have public morality, government morality, the notion that government is there to serve everybody, including the people who pay their taxes, you're going to have a compliance issue in perpetuity, surely.
You've got it already. If you look at the tax buoyancy figure, and of course, just for those who don't know, that's of course the trying to measure your increase in revenue compared to your increase in GDP. And if it goes over 1, it means you're being more efficient than you should. That's declined. And it's declined not only because of what occurred during its SARS, it's also declined because of massive level of decline in tax morality. People not paying. I mean, we've got many cases of people not handing over the PAYE from their employees. Lots of companies, that's totally illegal. I mean, it's outrageous. Actually, you're stealing from your own employees and stealing from themselves at the same time. And I'm afraid to say that will continue until such time as people open up their newspapers and read about all these corruptees and corruptors actually finding themselves being held accountable by the criminal law. Until that happens, we are always going to have a tax morality problem, because I think, going back to a point about, we all pay a hell of a lot for private expenses, absolutely correct, stuff that many other countries the state provides. I would like to think that the vast majority of South Africans understand our levels of inequality and would be prepared gladly to pay the tax if it went to the poor people for whom it was intended.
And that is the problem. So if you can accept that you live in a privileged position in a deeply unequal society, and in order to live the lifestyle you want to, you pay effectively a private wealth tax. However, when you drive along the road and you have to replace your sump once or twice a year, or you look at the homelessness issue, or you look at the long queues at SASSA centers and ministers who are completely incapable of doing their jobs and improving the lot of the poor, and money is being stolen, people say, hold on a second, but if you're going to steal it, I might as well keep it, because it's going to be far better in my hands than in yours. And they find creative ways of dodging their taxes. In some cases, they find extremely complicated legal ways. In most cases, it's probably illegal. How do we change that mindset? To my mind, there's only one way of doing it, and that's actually improve service delivery. But geez, that's huge.
Well, that's the point. That goes back to our earlier discussion about the question of a capable state. I mean, the vaccine is a classic example, because actually you need the state here, right? And they've decided they're going to acquire it. So if they were like even half as efficient as the Brits have been, or the Americans, people would say, gosh, I don't mind paying this. Look at this. They produced the goods. The fact that they can't and they haven't been able to is exactly the problem that you're referring to. And if you combine that with the point that your taxes go in significant sum to corruption, well, then I'm afraid to say, until that is repaired, both of those. And I think they're actually hand in glove, because the more you have a corrupt state, the more you're going to have an incapable state, the more effectively you substitute efficiency for rent seeking. And what we've got in South Africa at the moment are unbelievably good rent seekers, and very few people who are building a society of the kind which should be in the image of the Constitution.
When we look at tax morality and South Africans' attitude towards paying their taxes, the vast majority of people are compliant. They are, most people have jobs, and the money goes and they disappear. They may resent it, but they accept that it happens. There are lots of people who somehow manage to dodge the tax net, and this is a deliberate action. Talk to me about a breakfast at the Alphen Hotel in Cape Town, just as a case in point.
Well, it's a good case in point, because I was working with one of the senior people in the criminal investigations, and we've been talking about all these matters, and that particular individual's quiet breakfast was disrupted by the roar of 26 Ferraris that arrived, the Ferrari Club. And remembering what we'd spoken about, this individual then went along, took an iPad and took photographs of the registration of all 26. Turns out that I don't think any of them was paying taxable income of more than 400,000 rands a year. Now, that's, I can say, as you say in court, I'd like to close my case now. That's exactly the problem. And by the way, I also think there's another problem, which may be somewhat more controversial. I'm intrigued by the role that the auditors, accountants for many wealthy people play. Let me give you an example of what I mean. There are a lot of people who've got offshore funds. When I once spoke about the fact that I'd like to know what on earth is going on in Mauritius, turned out that the Mauritian ambassador to South Africa was in the audience, and he was whiter than my shirt when he came up to speak to me, saying, what are you going to be doing about all of this? And what I'm saying is, when you look at those, many high net worth individuals who are audited by people, those auditors have to be extraordinarily careful before they sign off on the returns which they do, because my view is that many of them actually know damn well that their clients have got a hell of a lot of illegal money overseas. Astounding sums. And so there's responsibility there as well. And if you take the kind of Ferrari example I gave you, and that's why, by the way, on the Ferrari example, one of the things I do want to do is to go and check the acquisition of all of those luxury motor cars from the distributors suppliers over the last 5 years, and then correlate to the tax returns of people. And all of a sudden, you'll find a lot of money. And once you do, that starts, I think, people saying, I'd rather take some amnesty or do a deal with SARS rather than go to the criminal courts.
But we've heard this idea being mooted before, but it doesn't ever seem to have gone somewhere. I mean, is this your personal mission? Because I think it's something that does irritate you a lot as somebody who's been in public service for an awfully long time and has had to hustle for a buck and who's had to pay your taxes. You find it personally offensive, I think.
I do find it offensive, Bruce, because I find particularly in a society of the kind of unbelievable levels of inequality that we have, that people should be able to get away with this in the way they do with impunity. I find that very difficult to deal with. I do think we're all in this boat together, and whilst I've been extraordinarily critical about the lack of initiatives with regard to corruption, etc., there's corruption on both sides here, and in a sense, you want to fix the one, you want to fix the other. So yes, I am concerned about that, and I'm concerned about people, therefore, because if you look at the majority of people, vast majority of people listening to two of us, the vast majority of people, working class people, as you say, they pay their taxes, they pay their VAT, they pay PAYE, and they don't have much money. So then when you've got a person who can afford a Ferrari or two, who's paying less than they are, it cannot possibly be justified on any basis. No, it does irritate me. It should irritate us all.
Is there a simple fix? Is there, a bubblegum and sticky tape fix to the tax problem, at least in the beginning, to start getting the thing moving? Because, let's talk about what happened, rather. Let's talk about Buoyancy, and then let's talk about a fix. Because you've got SARS, it's going along, it's working absolutely fine. We then have the Buoyancy era. And the Buoyancy era, he's too sick to go to, sadly. We wish him well. Hopefully he's recovered by the time this plays out. But he was too sick to go to the Zondo Commission after a couple of days of some really damning testimony about him. Butter wouldn't melt in his mouth if you asked him. He seems completely oblivious to the fact that he did anything wrong. How strong is the case against Tom Buoyancy for the deliberate destruction of SARS?
Again, as I said before in other interviews, I don't know whether Mr. Buoyancy was just plainly incompetent or whether, in fact, he was part of a state capture initiative, or whether it was a combination of two. That's for Judge Zondo to find out. Although if you read the Nugent report, you certainly know that all of those questions are legitimate questions to ask Mr. Buoyancy, who appeared to be ill just a little back when he was supposed to come and testify. And I'd be curious to see when he does appear, if at all, because the case against him is enormous if you think it through. Just take the evidence given a little while back by Symington, who suggests that Buoyancy's bodyguard intimidated him to get hold of documents which quite clearly indicated that there was no basis of any legal basis to attack Mr. Gordon or indeed all of those other people like Van Lochenberg et al. So you ask, he's got to answer, what on earth was he up to? We know in relation to the Sikakani report, and of course, I'm always irritated by people who say, well, why wasn't that reviewed? And the simple answer is you don't review a report. There's no reports don't affect your rights. They do morally, but not legally, and therefore there's no basis to review it. But the truth is that as I understand the facts, and I'd be interested what Mr. Buoyancy has to say about this, there was a very comprehensive report opinion done by Wim Trengove SC, shortly after the Sikakani report, which absolutely eviscerated the legal foundations of the report. Now, if you're a proper commissioner, you may say, okay, even Trengove gets things wrong, and maybe Mr. Sikakani was correct, although my own view about it is that he was unfairly treated because not all the facts were made available to him, but that's another matter. The point I'm simply making is a responsible person would say, I'm now facing an utterly contradictory, well-reasoned opinion. I now have to tread with caution. I can't just keep on relying on it. I've got to either get another view, etc. That's what people do. He didn't do anything of the kind. Then, of course, we had the incredible exodus of talented people from SARS.
But
Right,
1,000 people, 1,000
yes,
senior people,
the best,
hugely
the
skilled,
best.
capable people went into the private sector. The private sector lapped them up because you've got insiders now working for you.
Yeah, and you know, Bruce, I have to say, I never forget, it's an image I have, and it's starting to again resurrect itself. When I first was asked to go to speak to Praveen Gordhan when his first term as Minister of Finance, and the issue was whether we should have another tax commission, we were at the old Reserve Bank building, and the table was full of people, many from SARS. And I walked in, and it looked like the new South Africa. It looked like South Africa that I wanted. You know, the vast majority of people were black. There were a couple of white people in the room. And when I walked out, I thought, this country can truly be saved. Every single one of those people are exceptional, and they're far more exceptional than the people that I remember who were running the show under apartheid. Just extraordinary people. And they all went. Almost all of them disappeared out of SARS thanks to the Moyani era. And he has much to answer for. And you know, what really upsets me is people who sort of defend him on some sort of, you know, goodness knows what basis, without asking one fundamental question. What effect did the degradation of SARS have on people living on the margins? People who are desperate for social security or better schooling or better healthcare. I mean, we can afford it privately. They can't afford it at all. That was the effect of Moyani. And we don't really seem to be able to promote a discourse which actually focuses attention on not the personality, but the consequences. And so I'm afraid to say, I think that Kieswetter came in, inherited what was an extraordinarily chaotic situation. I must say, as I said earlier to you, I'm now beginning to feel more confident. When I sit around the room, I get the same sort of feeling all those years ago. There's some really capable and dedicated people at SARS, right across the board. Some of whom I might add were there under the old administration, i.e. under the Nats, and are still incredibly experienced. I mean, the one person that I was ready, let me name him, so sorry to see go, was Kursy Lowe, who had been at SARS forever. And anybody in the tax world knew Kursy Lowe. And Kursy Lowe was an encyclopedia. Whenever I asked Kursy Lowe something like, why did we change the act in 1989? He would know. And that level of knowledge, that institutional memory was destroyed in a nanosecond.
Can we get it back? I mean, I asked the bubblegum and sticky tape question because you've got to start repairing some very, very simple and basic things just to get stop the boat from leaking and maybe heading in a direction. Is it possible?
Yes, because one of the things that the commission is doing, and I'm very pleased to see that SAICA have been really playing ball with us. They've been much better than my own profession, the legal profession, who have not come out of this much credit, because we've reached out to the accountants and lawyers and said, can you find us people, two categories of people, people who are retired or about to retire with enormous experience, forensic experience, tax experience, financial experience, who can basically come in and work for SARS for a couple of years and help recapacitate the whole institution. And the lawyers have been pathetic about that, but the accountants have been fantastic. So we could land up with 200 or 300 people coming into SARS over time. The 3 billion rand that was allocated to SARS, part of it will be for this, to pay people to come in, to actually come and recapacitate SARS under the assistance, obviously, of the really good people who are in SARS. So the answer is, if we could get 100 or 150 serious people into SARS, it changes very quickly. You know, I'm old enough to remember when towards the dying days of the apartheid regime, you could, if you were an accountant, you could go into SARS rather than to the military. And I remember as a young tax consultant saying, when these people arrived to attack my clients, you know, we're in a different ballpark now. These are guys with honors degrees in tax. They don't take nonsense. They understand. And so that's the image I have. So the answer is yes, we can.
And the question also, I mean, lots of people losing hope in the country, the incapable state, the noise and the politics, and just the Zondo Commission testimonies that you hear, and just the inaction by the state. At some point, the talk of pushback, the talk of reclaiming the soul of the country has to stop. Do you see your role in there? You get a special cape. Maybe you have to wear your underwear outside your trousers. I mean, do you see yourself as having that kind of role in trying to just restore some confidence,
I think I think all of us should be doing that. I think, and people like yourself on the radio who kind of, certainly when I listen to you on 567, 702, I mean, the question of promoting a discourse or holding government accountable, holding everybody accountable, and then trying to saying that's just one thing, getting in there, rolling up on sleeves and trying to actually make a difference is absolutely crucial because we're all in this boat together, one way or the other. I'm always sort of comforted by the famous saying of Jan Smuts, who once said, in South Africa, never the best nor the worst ever happens.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? I mean, it's a bizarre kind of place where we fear the very worst. It doesn't happen. Then we get these extreme senses of optimism, whether it was 95 Rugby World Cup, 99 last year, whether it was hosting the Soccer World Cup. Oh, finally, yes, we show we can. And then we start fighting with each other again and go back into the cesspit and get very, very dirty and filthy once again. I mean, in 2 years' time, when I go to the lockdown for the budget speech and I get those 2 kilograms of paper and I go to whatever page it is that talks to me about how many registered taxpayers there are there going to be more than 5,000 people declaring 1.5 million rand a year in income? Because it is,
I hope so,
a ludicrous situation.
I hope so. I hope so, because if we haven't done that, then we failed in our job. It's not going to take a week or two, but I would imagine, since you've given us a 2-year span, the answer is yes, absolutely. And if we don't do that, you see, the fundamental question, Bruce, is that we've got no wriggle room to actually increase taxes. That's the real point. I mean, there is no real potential for significant increase in tax in South Africa, and Minister Mweni knows that. That's why he was prepared, even in this crisis, to signal that corporate tax should come around to 27. My own view is I'd like it around about 22 or 23. And I think he's right that the way to do that is to eradicate a whole lot of unnecessary incentives and then, of course, to close them at the same time. Now, if we can do that and perhaps even reduce individual income tax to appreciable levels, but collect more, that's really the achievement. We get the tax buoyancy over one again. That's the achievement.
But that's what Gordon did. I mean, when you looked at the lack of the complexity, and what the Katz Commission did so effectively was to re-simplify the tax system, was to get higher levels of compliance. And when you get higher levels of compliance, revenues rise. It's a global experience. It doesn't strike me that we have to invent anything brand new here.
Absolutely right. But we do have the one disadvantage that other countries have. They probably can increase taxes. And I think in many parts of the world that is going to happen. There's a whole re-debate about austerity and economics. It's amazing how many webinars I've been in with distinguished economists who are actually talking about changing the paradigm. We don't have that option. It doesn't matter. I keep on saying to my friends on the left, it's all very well. I accept I'm not an austerity man myself, but if you've got an incapable state, what's the point? You can raise extra money, you'll ruin the economy, and you won't get the delivery. So the question is, we don't do that. What we got to do is make the most we can by squeezing the closing the gap between the effective and nominal rates of tax and reconfiguring the state, which goes back to an earlier debate that we've been having about making it more capable. And then we're on the right path.
We're in capable hands. I mean, Tito Mboweni doesn't seem to like the office too much. He tweets a lot from Gebuskloof and often from his very quite parsimonious little oven. Maybe that's all you need for pilchards. He doesn't seem to get the office all that much, yet he is the guy with the right value set, mindset, and principles and understanding of economics to understand what needs to be done. Maybe that's good enough for now.
He's a trade economist, yeah.
And had we been in the hands of Des van Rooyen or Malusi Gigaba, and that's the danger here, is it's all well and good. We can fix a lot of stuff when the right people are in the right jobs and we're going in the right direction, everybody's pulling together. But we have seen what happens when things go awry, and that's quite scary.
Yeah, and I think it's correct that when you've got somebody at the helm of Treasury who's really very capable, that makes a big difference. Although let us be quite honest about it, Treasury itself has seen over the years an exodus of extremely wonderful people. I was talking to somebody at Treasury the other day, and names were mentioned. I've seen forgotten that they were there. Staggeringly brilliant people who went into the private sector, and so even Treasury, I think, needs a boost. You talk about people standing up and being counted. It'd be good to have some more experienced hands in there as well, because the minister, whoever the minister is, needs that advice.
Yeah, I mean,
even Kagaba, you talk about. I had some dealings with him because, as the chair of the tax committee, all the ministers of finance, when there were changes, would call me and have a long chat. And for a number of years, I mean, the story was told that Kagaba was particularly interested in getting rid of us because, it was rumored that he was close to Buoyancy. I don't think that was true, actually. And he was then told by the Director General, no, you shouldn't fire these people. They've been finding us the revenue for years, to keep us going. And I had two very significant conversations with him. And it's very interesting when you become the Minister of Finance and take your job responsibly. I'm not defending him. I'm just simply saying the job itself has a discipline, all of its, and you think, well, I'm now the Minister of Finance. Actually, I can't do this. It's just not possible. And so I'm not suggesting that you appoint anybody to the job, but I think that the job weighs heavily on people. And clearly we are lucky to this extent that when he's not giving us recipes, the minister does have a seriously acute understanding of the complexity of the economy here.
Are you looking forward to the next, I don't know, how long's your contract? 2 years, 3 years?
I've got a year and I'll probably renew it thereafter. I am. And the reason is because I really think we can make a difference here. And, I saw it under Gordon. And, Keith Vetter was a deputy to Gordon, so he understands the system very well. And he's a good manager. So he's kind of giving people space to do the stuff that they should. And I keep on coming back to it. As a constitutional lawyer who's concerned about corruption, I'm absolutely convinced that the Al Capone strategy is the best way to deal with this. In a country, there are no resources outside of that to do it properly.
And that Al Capone strategy, for anybody who doesn't know it, I mean, just elaborate a little bit, because we're so busy trying to prosecute so many crimes and so many different things because so many people have done so many things wrong. You really just need one or two provable facts where, you open somebody's bank statement and there's an element of cash flow that can't be explained. A crime has been committed. You don't need to prove anything else. Off you go to jail.
Correct, and that's exactly right. And if you've got people in the revenue department, as there are, deeply committed to probity, it is possible. It's more than possible.
Dennis Davis, thank you very much.